P.T. Sen and Mr. Thacker and Udayan were also there. Raza was deeply interested besides visual arts, poetry, music and dance. And way back in the 2001, when the Raza Foundation started, he started with giving national awards. At that time, on a small money, 1 lakh each. 2 for visual arts, 1 for classical dance, 1 for classical music, and 1 for poetry. We stopped this in 2009, and by that time, almost 38 persons have received the award all over the country. Raza, as you know, is a very generous man. I have known many generous people. This has been the good luck in your life, because these days you don't come across generous people. You come across all kinds of selfish monsters of various forms, especially in politics and in everyday life. But he was a remarkably generous man who helped and who was deeply interested in promoting the younger generation. COVID pandemic has taken its toll in terms of what we are planning to do during the centenary. To start with, a major show in Centre de Pompidou in Paris had to be postponed. It will now take place perhaps in 2023. But keeping apart from these festivals which are taking place after Calcutta, I think we are in for Bombay, Pune, Baroda. I just had a chat with Mahatma yesterday. Pune, Bangalore, Gopal, Gwalior, etc. Raza was very fond of his friends. So in keeping with that fondness, he had also thought that we do something, at least one event for each of his friends. Which meant Mahmoud Hussain, Souza. Souza, a major thing we are doing in Goa. That has also been held up because of COVID. But otherwise it will take place. But we have done one event on Schumann. We hope to do something on Mahatma, Mahatma Hussain, Dr. Karam Singh, Gatonde. I think in February, we are doing a show curated by Udayan of the Raza awardees. Not all of them, some of them, who got into Udayan, have survived and have grown into worth noticing now. We are also doing in 5 public galleries of Delhi simultaneously an exhibition of 100 young artists of India. There are 5 curators who are at work, and we'll be putting up in the 5 public galleries. There is a major show of Raza from the collection of Kiran Nadar Museum to open in Bikaner House. Also organizing, hopefully in March or April, a 3-day festival of young Indian poets from 15 languages. There are several classical and modern dancers who are doing choreographic work inspired by Raza. One of them you will be seeing in this festival by P.T. Patel. But there are others, and we hope to do a festival which will again be unique of choreography inspired by Raza's works. So we are trying to do, mind you, Raza during his lifetime would not allow the Raza Foundation to do anything or spend a single pie on him. So it's only after his death that we have been emboldened to do things for him. He he would not approve of it because he said, Raza Foundation is meant for others, not for me. But anyway, that's how it is. So you are in for an interesting discussion. I will not hold you back. I express my gratitude once again that it's a very nice put up exhibition. And it is so nice that apart from the prints that we have, you have the original works which the Imami group possesses. Thank you very much. May I take my seat? Some of the seniors.
Thank you very much, sir. May I now request Shri Udayan Vajpayee to share a few words.
Right.
Thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence. Moving on to the talk session, it is a privilege to have such a distinguished panel before us this evening. May I now request the panelists and the moderator to step ahead and take their seats. We have in our midst Dr. Geeti Singh, Jason Thakur, and Nana Ganguly. And today's session will be moderated by Sambhurna Chaudhary. Sambhurna is an art historian, writer, and researcher. She is currently pursuing a PhD research from the Center for Studies in Social Sciences on the art, institutional, and pedagogical history. Without much ado, I would like to hand it over to Sambhurna to begin the session.
Thank you, Anusha. Very good afternoon to everyone. I'm quite privileged to be in presence of this august company, and I'm immensely grateful for creating this opportunity for Kolkata to witness these range of works by SH Raza. I'm thankful to Kolkata Center for Creativity and to the Raza Foundation for bringing this here today. As we celebrate and contemplate on the work of SH Raza's works, I express a larger interest in a way where we address abstraction through a very stylistic lens. It is interesting to understand or view that abstraction is a language in visual arts which has not been carried forward through, pedagogical constructs or institutional methodologies, but it was almost like a revolt against those academic models. So it entered Indian artistic vocabulary essentially post-independence, and we have learned much of its scope through the works of Raza's So therefore it becomes critically important today to talk through the origins and the nuances that we have understood through generations regarding abstraction and visual art. And therefore, as I open up this panel today, we have Dr. Geeti Singh, who is of course a renowned cultural historian and art critic, who have worked with Times of India Bombay, India Today Delhi, magazine. She was the chief editor of the publication of India International Center in Delhi and the director of the India Cultural Center in Kathmandu, Nepal, from 2009 to 2013. She has authored 6 seminal books on Indian artistic practices and traditions. One of them is Victims of Akbarnama, Image and Imagination, Space, Time and Raza's Vision, Ganesh Pine and Revelations, Feminine Fables, which is imagining the Indian woman in painting, cinema and photography. And one of our latest recent publications is Your History Gets in the Way of Contemporary Essays on Indian Artists. Today she will be giving us an illustrated lecture on the overview of SH Raza's artistic route, making from his early artistic journeys and on contemporary Indian art and practices. One of the recent being the Raza Garden retrospective at Museum in Mumbai. And our final speaker today is Mr. Mahatma. He is a distinguished curator and critic, having curated exhibitions in Kolkata, New Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, New York, Tokyo, Singapore, and London. He was appointed commissioner of the 8th Pan-Asia Pacific Art Biennale by the in 1997. He has written extensively for Statesman, Nation-Age, Deccan Chronicle, and many other publications of repute. Some of his key curatorial projects include the Urban Narratives, Charles Lawrence Calcutta at the Victoria Memorial Hall, and the Sublime Transferences, which is one of the recent exhibitions that he has presented through Imami. Today, in his discussion, he will zoom out from the stylistic and painterly aspects of Raza's work, and he will be locating Raza through the making of the Bombay Progressive Artist Movement and through the societal structure of Bombay and the formation of its contemporaries and the networks and interpersonal relationships that was building during the early 40s and 50s. So we have quite an area arranged to cover and understand through Raza's work. So before, I won't be taking too much time because it's going to be quite an intense afternoon, I would like to invite Dr. Raza to the podium. Could you also, if I may remind you, if you could put your phone on silent mode so that the speakers won't be disturbing you. And after the session, I would like to open the space for some question and answers. If time permitted, we'll take the call accordingly. But I request you to all keep a note of your comments, questions, anything that you want to share, any anecdotes that you want to share. And we will take all of that after the presentations are completed.
Good afternoon. Could you hear me? Yes. I'm really delighted to be here in Kolkata, which is the city of my birth. And I want to thank the Kolkata Center for Creativity and the Raza Foundation in their collaboration to bring together in the centenary year of SH Raza, this panel discussion, a remarkable exhibition of Raza's work, which includes some originals in the Imami collection that I have never seen and that most of us have not had the privilege to see. And apart from that, to really have the pleasure to see what the KCC has been able to do. In 1 week, we get a treat in this building to 3 separate exhibitions. So I'm delighted to be here and to share with you some ideas on Raza. On Raza Sahab, whom I had the privilege to know and to watch him work and to discuss his ideas with him. This was published in my book, which has just been republished. Could you pull it up from there, Justin? It is republished by the Raza Foundation and through Babel Publishers. And I'm really happy to be here. And today I will be speaking largely on have said that the Bindu is really every artist has perhaps a focal point in their work, an image to which they return. And this was certainly true of Raza Sahib after he came to work on the Bindu in the 70s. The Bindu was always there in his work. It was there when he got to France and he did the early works. So I would like to start by saying that it was important that I met him and got to know him in the years 88, 89, 1991 at the process, at the time when the Bindu was being explored. He mentions that there is no need to apologize for repeating the same image. The Bindu, he says, is like a japmala. You use the same repetition and the meaning acquires more resonance. I also want to mention that in this talk we share the space with two very distinguished art historians and curators. So I will not be speaking, obviously, on the whole expanse of Raza's vision over 60 years. It's not possible in half an hour. So I have focused on the idea of the Bindu and his inspiration from nature and the environment, and how this could lead us to appreciate a sense of wholeness. Now, increasingly, there has been a shift in paradigms, a new perception of reality, with fundamental changes in values that move from the mechanistic view of the world towards a truly holistic conception of the universe. The ecological imperative of our times connects us to this web and brings us an acute awareness that the earth needs to be sanctified. I don't think I say this alone. I think this is one of the most important aspects that emerges from Raza's explorations. An acute awareness that the earth needs to be sanctified and made whole again. Raza's inspiration from nature was not alone. Of course, art in India has always been an ecstatic communion with nature. We don't have to really explore this more than to say that the myths also explore it. There's the myth of, well, let me just take two myths, the one of Varaha rescuing Prithvi, and the other of the penance by Bhagirath and the descent of the Ganga. So the sense of sanctity that is brought to the river, to the forest, to the Himalayas is something that is innate, is part of Indian sensibility. For Raza too, nature was a primary source of inspiration. I want to get my book, and I'm getting a little distracted. Do you mind very much, because I want to quote from there. So I want to speak about how Raza himself mentions how important it is. This was many years ago, but I don't think he changed his stand. It was the time when I was writing this book or researching this book, and that goes back to 1989 to 91. My present work, says Raza Sahib, my present work is the result of two parallel inquiries. Firstly, it aims at pure plastic order, form order. Secondly, it concerns the theme of nature. Both have converged into a single point and become inseparable. The point, the bindu, symbolizes the seed, bearing the potential of all life in a sense. It is a visible form containing all the essential requisites of line, tone, color, texture, and space. He was a visual artist, but he was also a great lover of music, of poetry, and of dance. And there's this wonderful line by a musician, Pandit Amarnath, who describes it thus: when you sing, you are unfolding the colors of a landscape. What a beautiful idea, that music is so intricately related to visual abstraction, to visual images. So this is a painting by clearly 1951. It's untitled, but it is the stage before Raza moves into abstraction. He's just arrived in Paris a year before this, and he has been told, it has been suggested to him that he should look at Cézanne. And of course he mentions in his first year in Paris that the first exhibition that he went to was the exhibition of Matisse, and then soon after in the same gallery, he discovered Van Gogh. So next slide, please. I just wanted to show this to remind ourselves how important it is to remember that Raza always painted landscapes and townscapes. This is something that Raza mentioned in our conversation. And it's so important when we're talking again about the seed, the importance of the seed in a plant and animal life, and that will be the same process in form as well. Next, please. This is Raza Sahib painting at his studio in Gubbio, image photograph taken by me. And it's important to realize that he has a studio behind him. This is in Gubbio, in the south of France, where I had the privilege to visit them, Janine and Raza. And it's important to realize that he painted in the open air, and that was very important for him, that he was in constant touch with nature. Next, please. This is the studio, not when Raza's painting, but it gives us an idea of what it was like. It was really just a 5 minutes or 7 minutes walk from the village, the 12th century village of Gubbio, and it was nestling against the forest. And in this garden, on 2 levels, were plants of every possible kind that you could imagine. There were olive trees, there were pine trees, there was everything. Next, please. This is the interior of the same studio in Gubbio, and you will see here how Raza has brought back from India. He left India in 1950, October, and from 59 he began to come back to India, and he would collect things that became so precious to him, like you have the lingam and pair of gongs, and you have the image of Murti, the head remind him, which keep him constantly in touch with India. And you have behind, to remind you of what I said, the forest. The forest is just the studio actually nestled against the forest. Next, please. So, moving from the trees and the forest to Raza's painting called Tree. It's a well-known work, but this is really the beginning of how you move from the image that you previously saw of Raza, of the townscape, into an abstraction. And you have here the idea of birth, the polarities of growth, the idea of the bindu, of the seed that grows into a tree. And the way it's manifested is through three colors: blue, green, and black. So it is a condensing of form into very elementary aspects. So this, the tree is, of course, as he says, I can't find the quote now, but he says, "It's strange that I needed 40 years to understand my passion and love for nature and to transpose this to canvas. I'm glad I took all this time, because it was not a gift to me by someone, a teacher, a book or something. It was the conclusion of a lifelong experience. Painting is something alive as human beings in its different manifestations. It is a vital process of becoming." Just imagine how fascinating it is that the seed contains the total inherent forces of a plant, of animal life, and so on. And that can be the process in art too. So this is what I wanted to mention. Next slide, please. This, in my own opinion, is one of his most wonderful works. It's called The Inaudible Sound. It doesn't need a title, but it is the expansion of sound into visual form. And you get that idea of how the bindu originally was a black point. There is this proverbial story, which some of us know, of how when Raza was 8 in his elementary school, and he did something of not concentrating. So he was asked to stay behind in the class. And when all the children had left, the teacher drew a black bindu and said, "Focus on this. Focus on this point." And this point became the genesis of the bindu that he developed so many years later. Next, please. This I found very interesting. I never saw the original. I just found a photograph of this among Raza's own papers. And his mandala, no title actually, I put mandala. And it is the formation of the mandala when the mandala is still evolving. In the years that he was evolving the idea of the circle. At the time when he was his work was much more moving into abstract art, but he hadn't arrived at the idea of the bindu. Next, please. Raza grew up, his father was a forest warden, and Raza grew up in a place called Manla. And once he said to me, Manla is actually Mandala, because the sacred river of the Narmada flows around. just 300 kilometers from the source on that count. So, but the point was that he related mandala to the idea of space that is sacred. The mandala is of course the cosmogram that is used by the Buddhists, the Jains, the Hindus, every possible religion in the East would use the mandala as space that is sacred. And for Raza to finally arrive at that idea of the sacred space being circular, being a circle, took time. It didn't evolve like a formula, it took time. Next please. So here's the Bindu. The Bindu in 1980. This 1970s is the time when he is exploring this. And the Bindu is in the still epicenter of this square form, the square canvas. Let's note that the rest of it that flows around the Bindu is gestural art. It is abstraction, but it's not art. It's volatile, it's moving. There is, the whole space is charged with a kind of energy. And let's also realize that the colors that Raza is using is the impassionate red and green and black, and a bit of yellow, and a bit of yellow, white. So the colors that he talks about, the 5 colors, are the 5 elements of the universe. He mentions that. But they are flowing around him. Next please. I want to go back to manuscripts, and we can move to the next manuscript. This is a dated manuscript of the Devi Mahatma that is discovered in the museum in Shimla, not discovered there, but kept there, and discovered in Narasimhapur. Next please. Here is another page. We can skip these. Can we go on to the next image? We can look at it, but we will see that the colors that Raza is using, of the red, the black, the yellow, the green, and the white. They are the colors that appear in the Bindu. So I think it's very important to realize that he doesn't just use these colors, they reoccur. And the 5 colors represent for him the 5 elements of nature. So that's very important to know that these colors of the black, as he said, is the mother color of all things. Black, white, red, green, blue. So, and sometimes it's white, sometimes it's red. So I think it's very important to realize that these colors. He also says something else which is important. The titles of my pictures may change from Bindu to Germination, 1987, to Genesis, 1989, to Tree of Life, 1989, to Angura, 1990. But the concept remains essentially the same. It is the resurgent spirit of rebirth, the fertilizing powers of the sun and the earth, which converge to give birth to new life. Next, please. So there is Bindu, 1980. I'm fascinated to see that in the collection of original paintings that have been represented here, there is a very similar and very powerful Bindu. this collection that has been put on show and that we have the privilege of seeing. The Bindu now is not a black focal point. It is now spinning, radiating energy. Next, please. And this is the very famous painting called Ma, with the two lines from SH Raza's poem. Ma लौट कर जब आऊंगा क्या लाऊंगा, which Ashokji once mentioned to me had nothing metaphorical about it all. He was actually saying it. Mother, when I come back, what will I bring for you? I don't know. He'll ask me to stay. But what I find fascinating about this huge, large painting is that on the one hand, on the left side, you still have the remnants or the remains of the abstract, floating bits and pieces. And on the right-hand side, you have the complete formation of the Bindu. This was one of the two paintings that Raza Saab sent to the Indian Triennale. And for the first time, he was invited and he chose one of the square paintings that you've already seen, the Bindu, and he chose this very large canvas to represent his work at the Triennale in India. Next, please. I think this is the last one in this series, and it's one that is sometimes called Emergence, and sometimes it's called Bindu. And in these he quotes a quote from Gandhi, which in turn is a quote by Gandhi from the Bhagavad Gita. In the midst of life, death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth. In the midst of darkness, light persists. So this sums up, in a sense, by 1990, which is about the time when I was concluding my research for my book and visiting with Raza. He was really drawing into himself the whole polarity of the different aspects of what the Bindu meant to him. I think I should stop here. I was going to show you some more slides, but let's have a chance to listen now to others. Thank you so much. You were going to be treated to some more images, but I think I've seen enough. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. So these are some of the other images. We could just look through them without my speaking.
Yes, it's...
Let's just look at the images and then I have some. Please continue. This is just the first one. Go back. Pehla wala, that's done by Raza Saab before he left India in 1946. It's called Bombay. After this, yeah. Sorry, these are two separate talks that I prepared, which I tried to. I'm not very good, but can we go on? Next. That is not working now. What's happened? Yeah, two separate talks. Here we are. Then just go back. Go back. No. Sorry, it doesn't matter. We'll leave it. On. Please go on. Go on. No, we are going backwards. All right, thank you.
Good evening, friends. Thank you, Geeti Singh, for laying this fantastic ground for the conversation ahead. And thank you, Kolkata Center of Creativity, for inviting us and holding this fantastic exhibition and the seminar and all these programs. members. So thank you for inviting me for this. So I'm just going to dive right in. As you know, Sambhona just introduced, I study art. So the presentation is a little bit based on visual history, visual culture. I'll be showing a lot of images. So please bear with me showing a lot of these slides. The premise of the presentation is based on the aspect of sound, like the title says it all, the aesthetics of sonic pictoriality. How sound, in a way, plays on us. You know, we don't realize that it's there outside the universe, it's there around us, it's there within us. And how Razaji has imbibed this in different ways. So there's Drishti, there's Nath, and there's Bindu. This is his own sketch, this is his own painting. So I'm just going to present it. So the first chapter is the earth as a resonating agent, which is more on a macro aspect of the universe and nature. Then word as a mantric frequency as to its effect, and the idea and the power of word has an internal effect on us. And how Razaji has used word in his paintings by using titles and poems, and then comes the Bindu. So I want to begin with this painting, which is Ma. As Nidhi Sen had mentioned, that this was his first painting for the Trinale that he was invited. You see all the three aspects here. You see the static, you see the motion, and you see the word. You see all the three aspects in this painting. So, as much as these titles as Ma, I see it more as an encompassing energy, as a Shakti, which is again around us, you know. So, the earth is a resonating agent. So, this is a scientific basis. There is this author, who has written in his book, the Schumann Resonance, Brainwaves, Neurofeedback and Beyond, which is introducing the subject of subtle energy, which is called life force, prana or chi. And he's defined it as the Schumann Resonance. So it's an entire book, but scientifically it has been proven that the earth is vibrating at 7.8 hertz. And we experience it through the ionosphere. Like you can see the earth in the sphere. It is constantly out there and we experience it through waves. We obviously don't realize it physically, but we can experience these wave energies if we meditate, if we listen to a particular music, through color, through art. So it is a scientifically proven phenomenon. That's an image from NASA of the Schumann Resonance. Now, of course, this frequency keeps changing. The latest is what I found out, it was 7.8 hertz. So this is just one aspect, one fact. Now, these are traditional Rajasthani 19th century paintings. The second one is the cosmic plan representing the interaction of elemental forces. And the other one is a yantra depicting the evolution and involution of the cosmos. So this is more very Indian cultural ideology and expression. It is even stated in the Upanishads that all this universe of motion moveth in the prana, and from the prana also it proceeded. So we have been living with this cultural concept of one complete universe, one complete existence, and we are part of it. Now this is a semantic experience which was invented by Dr. Hans Jenny. It is bringing matter to life. So these are the effects of sound. The third image is what sand. This fourth is on water, and the fifth is a digital image. So very coincidentally, if you see, the circle is a very natural form that gets created with sound. And you do see aspects of this in Raza's paintings, right? I'm not saying that he had reference to these elements. This is my reading, this is my perception into his work. So we've laid the premise. So scientific, artistic, philosophical experiment. So on the macro aspect, artists, poets, philosophers and scientists have explored the sonic pulsating earth space, depicting it as a circle, as a form of energy, urja, suggestiveness of dhwani, realization of Nath Bindu, relativity of time and space, and a somatic experiment. Now we come to the micro aspect, which is nature, right? Like we experience all these things, but we don't see it in its physicality. So how do we experience it? We experience it through nature, we experience it through movement, we experience it through air, we experience it through, the brushing of the trees, the ripples of water, fire, earth, right? Like the sand moving, the breeze in the sand. So nature has been the muse for many artists as a site of expressing its structural elements to the play of light as seen through the history of Western art, and also as a site of engaging with organicity, mood and gesture as seen through the history of Eastern or Oriental art. Both the characteristics of structural composition and organic fluidity are synthesized into a composite brushwork and lucid composition for Raza. So we're going to examine brushworks, because a lot of his early works, which is pre-Bindu, the early landscapes, the latte, which is to do with the earth, which is to do with this entire idea of resonance. That is what I'm going to explore, and we're going to see and observe the various brush strokes that we see in a lot of Western artists, Indian artists, and how they all culminate into Raza's works. So the first is landscape as movement and speed, as seen in Turner's works. We all know Turner, so I've kind of avoided putting details into these paintings. I'm just trying to make it very visual. So if you see in all these paintings, what he's trying to capture is light. You'll see a focal point of light, and you will see speed, movement. It could be a storm, it could be like the speed of the train, the last one. That's what he's trying to capture. The next one is also by Turner, his later works, where he's trying to capture the atmospheric light. Right? There's not so much of the vigor or the dynamism of light and speed, but it kind of gets subdued. It becomes more abstract. But again, if you observe in the previous one and in this one, you will see the horizon, you will see perspective, you will see a foreground and a background. That doesn't get diminished. So that remains in Western art for quite some time. Then we have Shazan, Paul Cézanne. This is again his famous series of what is this? A mountain that he was painting, and if you see that he's painted the same mountain, it's the same direction, but you don't get a sense of light. The concept of light is diminished in his paintings. He's capturing the space, he's capturing the expanse of the space. You can observe that from the brush strokes, like the first one, the second one, the bottom one, and the last one is more and more abstract. But again, you do see a perspective, you see a foreground and a background. Then we have Kandinsky, which is symbolic. Again, they're not the thick brush strokes, but you see them moving into lines, you see them into shapes, you see landscape turning into color tonalities. And that was how Kandinsky then moved into his abstract works of the later period, capturing the sound and the cosmic sound, right? So it was all to do with music and sound. Then we come into Indian miniatures, where the landscape is depicted as a mood, the entire series of Ragmala paintings. So again, here if you see, light is not a dimension. You won't see the play of shadow and dimensionality, but it is shown in a very gestural way. Like the first one, you'll see it as a turmoil, Van Gogh strokes, and the other one you see as lightning, right? So there is a sense of mood depicted in these paintings. This is landscape as celebration. Now if you look at the first image, which is the celebration of a season, and the second one which is Holi, again it's one surface, there's no perspective. You know that there's a background and a foreground, but it is not so clear. It feels like one plane, one surface. And that was the beauty of Indian miniatures. They were such small paintings, and you could see a whole world into them. Landscape as love, longing. This doesn't have such a direct relation to Raza, but I feel that in his paintings, there is a sense of love. It was never void. You know, like if you look at Gaitonde's paintings, which was, you know, a lot to do with emptiness and void. In Raza's painting, there was a lot of love, this longing. You know, you feel these emotions in his paintings, in his brush strokes. Then we see landscape as gesture. So that's a complete painting that I've just detailed out part of it, where you see the way the lightning is done in curved lines, and you will, I mean, I hope you can register all these images that I'm showing, because you will see it in all his paintings. You see the way the water is done. It's done in a very symbolic, in a very gestural manner. That painting. So landscape, or I can say nature as experienced by Raza. So movement, speed, atmospheric light, space, symbol, gesture, celebration, love and longing, and again gesture. So now we'll just have a look at some paintings that I won't speak, so you all can enjoy it. The image in black and white is a painting by Kandinsky. I've intentionally not, put the colored image because I wanted us to just examine the strokes. Because what I'm examining here are the brush strokes, the technique of painting. So that's Kandinsky, that's Raza. That's a 1960 work. So all the images are going to be in chronology. I've again not put the details here because I wanted the focus to just be on the images. But if you want to know any particular work, title or year, you just ask me and I'll read it out. These are again Shehzad's works in black and white. Now the title of that work is Red Roofs. Very interesting, right? Yes, 59. That's my favorite. It's titled The Red Sun, again 1959. So, you know, when he titles his work, and you're like, okay, you know, technically you can see one red sun, you can point to one at the top, but there are so many, right? I mean, there is no perspective. It's a multi-perspective, there's a multi-dimensionality to this painting. That's Rajasthan, 1961. That's Narmada, 1 and 2, 1966. So you see, it shifts from the very thick brush strokes. You see his paintings and his brush strokes becoming more fluid. Now, of course, because this is Narmada, it is fluid, but you'll even see it in the other paintings. That's Village. Now the painting, the other one, the left one, is Gaitonde, again a painting from the 60s. So Gaitonde is another artist that I've just been working on and researching, and even he was very influenced by the sonic aspect of the land, of the nature. But he never gave up the horizon. You see a clear horizon in all his canvases. You see the line, but in Raza's you don't see the line. You see, it's all like movement, like sand, just moving. images are a little dark here. But now if you look at this, Zameen. Richard Bartholomew has written a beautiful passage, but I don't think I have the time to read it, so I'm just going to skip through it. But you can see the play of light. You can see, you have the time? Okay. So I'll just read this, okay? It's very important, it's very nice. In the painting of this decade, done in acrylics, Zameen 1971 and Oasis 1975, this vision and perception is freed further from the slightest reference to representational elements. There are no specific forms that relate to architecture or to the forest, nor is there any indication of a point of view or a perspective. A dark calligraphic structure or a series of impetuous notations float over the variegated field of continuously placed motifs which are luminous and streaked and veined with membrane textures. The whole fabric of the painting appears to be a collated vision of a continuous expanse of the phenomenon we have experienced as nature, night, fires. The glow of sunlight, green fields at daytime, and in twilight, trees and their forms merging with the night. A loose sectional design is deployed, never rigidly, and sections enclose triangular forms, fully or partially formulated, which thrust out in many directions. A nervous life is generated by these active forms and life colors, and there is the suggestion of presence of a vast, fecund force, a dark, inscrutable force, as Wordsworth said, that reconciles discordant elements and makes them cling together in one society. Zameen. That's La Paire. I have got this from his book, Art Critique. So it must be for an exhibition. Sure. But this particular passage was for La Paire, was for the painting Zameen. I don't have that information right now, but I'll find out and I'll let you know. So a lot of his paintings of this period are called La Paire. It's to do with the earth. This is Oasis, the one that we spoke about. And that one is Jaisalmer. That's again La Paire. So you see, the entire structural element is like melting, It's like moving into spaces, like earth and fire and water. All the elements are just playing with one another, like an orchestra which is not formed, which gets formed later into the bindu. La Paire again, 1980. La Paire again, 1980. That is Rajasthan, 1980, 1981. And that's again Rajasthan. So now we go into the next chapter, which is word as a monthly frequency. We all know the power that the word has in the human being. So I'll just again put some codes, we don't need to read them. But what I will request, if a mic is given to Ashokji or Udayanji, if you can just read this in Sanskrit, these texts, it will just be very interesting. Hindi. Okay. Something. No? You can't do it? You can read this?
What?
If you can read this, is Apur the German and Hindi is not so good.
Read the lines from a game. The case like Hindi.
In Hindi?
They're not Sanskrit.
Okay, sorry, can you read them? I take my words back, Hindi.
We use a very large number of words.
Yes.
Borrowing lines from them. It includes Upanishads,
Yes.
etc. Up to Kabir, Surdas,
Yeah.
Ajay, Khalid, Amir,
Yeah.
Faiz, Vedanta Singh. one of very recipes.
Yes.
Those who else have come to our days. People has come to the cookies, and tell them, भाई ये सब छोड़ो, ईश्वर का में लगाओ अपना ध्यान। तो गोपियाँ कहती हैं उनको मन है तस्वीर, एक भूतों से बेहोश से आप हमारे पास कोई मन है ही नहीं, हम ईश्वर को क्या आ रहा है?
Yes. So I can read the translation of it. It is not white, it is not black, it is not red, it is not yellow, it is not large or small, it is similar in form to the light, its essence is Shiva, which is in you. This Shiva, this is inscribed behind the painting. Sorry.
This is Mahatma.
Yes, yes. The lamps are blowing off in the holy places. Put the heart ablaze since the light is not enough. And these are your translations, so these are translations that are done by Sir. Let the path be unknown, my prana be lonely. The alone is the beginning, the early morning. This is simple art. I am jealous of the rocks, hills, the trees, which are lonely as mountains. They are also engrossed amongst themselves. I wish I could be like them, who rise above themselves. They have conquered their ego. I wish I could be like them. They have forgotten their own existence and have merged with nature.
This is Mukti.
Yeah. Then this is, as it drowns in the dark, so it becomes illuminous.
This is, I think, from Bihari. As it dips into the black, it becomes luminous.
So maybe this is the source of his using black. Sorry? Shyam is also Krishna. This is Satya Asatya 1999, and the translation is Rahim, in this world where there are two hard things. Through truth you don't attain the world, through lies you don't reach Ram. Rahim. So yeah, now we go to the next section, which is the last one. It finishes in 10 minutes, right? Okay, fine, okay. So the self-reflecting as Bindu. So please, sound itself solidifies and attains the Bindu-ness. This is Raza's quote. So all that we just see this far and there it kind of merges. So this is a very early work of Raza. The first one is Raza, the second one is an Indian miniature cosmic dance. So here we just want to see the many circles, the many bindus that he experimented with, and how many he explored, you know. This work is 1957. Now this is very interesting. This one is called The Horizon, 1979, and that one is titled Bindu, 1981. So my reading into it is, this is color, there is a horizon, there is the sun. So it's the horizon. There's no color. It's quite flat. That's why he's arrived at the Bindu. This painting has already been shown by Dr. Giti Sen, that's Inaudible Sound. And I'm just referencing to another work, a Rajasthan painting, which is Om the Cosmic Sound. Sorry, which one? The Raza painting? It's 1981. Sorry? I have the reference of 1981. Sorry. This is consciousness. This is the consciousness painting again, Rajasthan, 18th century. So a lot of these miniature paintings, actually, all of them are reference to Ajit Mukherjee and his research and all his publications. And the others are again Raza. You can see how he's trying to, play with black and its tonalities and the bindu and texture. I don't know if it's miniatures written Rajasthan consciousness painting. It's from a manuscript. That's Emergence, 1988. This is Genesis and Bindu. This is again a text by him. I think all of you are interested in Raza should get the book Bindu by Niti Sen, because I have derived a lot from the book. That's Bindu again, 1994. Now the first one is again the universe and orbits, and astronomical computation representing universe and orbits in the hemisphere, extending towards extra-universal space known as Aloka, Gujarat, 17th century. And the others are of course Raza paintings, Parambindu, Kundalini, the inner eye of Shiva. And then it gets into that, if you remember the semantic image that I've shown you, it gets into a very vibratory form of expression. So it's called Spandan. The first one is Spandan, the second one is Bhumi, and the third one is again Bhumi. So Naad and Bindu are in consonants, Bindu and Art are in consonants, Art and Naad are in consonants. The three Art, Bindu and Naad are in unison. That's it. Thank you.
You really transform us to a different universe altogether. About this boy from Barbaria, who again went back to Barbaria to be married. He came again and again, but what intrigued me, and still intrigues me about Raza, is the fan is too strong, the graft. It's hitting straight on the head. Can this be awful? Then even after almost spending some 70 years in Europe, he still retained the Indian passport. And this fan is too much actually. Acha. Or can I take the mic and this is something. Hello? 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 Yeah. So, what intrigues me about Raza, who left for Paris in 1950 and started coming to India in 1959, that when he died, he still kept his Indian passport. Because we have seen his whole body of paintings, but what always kind of haunted me with the kind of notion about his notion of nationhood. Which nation did he belong to? Whenever he was in France, he was talking of India. When he was in India, he was talking about France, because I had some personal rendezvous with him when I was a top reporter and a rookie and writing for a capital newspaper. I'm talking about the late 80s and early 90s. We talked about France, about the museums, about the wine, about the cheese. And when he went back to France, he was so full of India. People like Sundar Bajaj, who were near to him. So, that notion of nationhood, that notion of nation is also very interesting in his life. And his act of kindness, as Ashok said, that he was such a generous man, he was generous to his friends, to the people around him, that legend has it, when he used to go back to the airport from India, he would give money to the taxi drivers. If you were to carry some cash and a lakh or two, this legend has it, that he would give that money, donate this money to the taxi driver there. So that is his range, that was his range of generosity. And because I'm not going to talk about specific genre here, because there's a difficulty in stumbling into a kind of a very definitive hearing to tell and the stories to tell, because we are plunging into a kind of a trap, a kind of a foreclosure, which I don't want to do, because we are in a foreclosure on abstract art, that when was abstract in India and elsewhere and in Indian art. But the point is that you have to understand, because this was a pre-independent post-colonial artist who were trying to find a voice and was trying to find a language. And I would like to quote Gade here, that he says, I've come to believe that pictorial truth is a self-content phenomena within the limits of the medium, and visual imagery is only a means to arrive at this truth. Therefore, I have no story to tell, no literary message to give, no social commentary to make in my pictures. My paintings, disseminating my ideas and experiences as a painter. I close. As a started very long in Bombay, where the sense of modernism, because if you visit the fourth floor upstairs, you will see the paintings of Bengal from the same window, from the same space window. You will see the language of Gade, the same person who came to Bombay after graduating from Nagpur and then joined the School of Art. He was the midst of modernism. So what made this modernism? Because I don't want to be very theoretical here, because we know the so-called story of modernism is a story of an artificial story that has taken place elsewhere. So I'm not finding any context here. Who made it to this kind of the so-called modern in Bombay and with our modern Indian art? The first line, please. This person is named Rudy von Leyden. He was a central figure in the 40s, in the mid-50s in the art scene in Bombay, working as the main art critic of the Times of India, collecting Indian artworks from various periods, organizing exhibitions, and actively promoting young and contemporary artists. He was a contributing editor of the Leading and Review Mark from 1946 and served as an advisor for the acquisitions and art commissions of the Tata Institute of Fundamental what we know as TIFR, which owned one of the most important collections of post-independence Indian art. Adapting enthusiastically to his new home in Bombay, also along with him was Walter Langhammer, a well-known Viennese artist who set up open house at his studio on Nepean Sea Road, an young artist who were to develop into the great names of Indian progressive art movement like Raza, Hussain and others, would meet there on Sundays to hear him the tales of the European art scene, exhibiting regularly inside the Bombay Art Society. Langhammer was soon surrounded by an in-crowd of fellow European Jewish refugees who escaped from the Nazi persecution before the World War II. Professionals, artists, doctors and industrialists who became important art patrons and accelerated the progressive art movement. Langhammer brought into India an American-born expressionistic painter, Kokoschka's style of panoramic landscape. You see the early works of Raza and compare that is just mentioned with the works of another Indo-based artist, from the Indo school, not exactly Indo-based, you find the difference. Kokoschka's style of panoramic landscapes of the great European cities in pure hues. Similar hues of color were employed by Bengal to replace the yellow color scheme of the existing Indo school as an usher of the year SH Raza towards the end of the 1940s. He saw a future in the modern art movement. He said it was all over Europe. So people People like Ara, Raza, Hussain, Souza and Raiba, the great names of the Indian progressive art movement, became his students. Every Sunday was an open house at his agency road. Next slide, please. This is Walter Lamana, means a very accomplished artist. Every Sunday it was open house at his studio on agency road. SH Raza himself speaks of Lamana. This gentleman in his autobiography, he says he sold 2 watercolors for ₹40 each, and Raza even was being introduced to the Viennese pattern in Sri Lanka. Following his patronage, Raza became close to Lamana and was given his studio. You can use my studio during the day, said Lamana, who became the painter. Raza would paint during the day and show him his works during evening. In 1947, Raza joined the Indian School of Art and had enough money to pay for his education. Raza left the Express Law Studios and spent time doing only art. When Raza left for Paris, Lamana gave him his overcoat and a pair of shoes. Lamana was indeed more than a painter, a venerable Samaritan for the progressives. And who was this legend? Next slide, please. This was a painting done by Lamana, titled The Art Critic. Next. This is, I'll come back to this slide later. Next, we can see those things are here with his wife. Next slide, please. Again, this is Raza. Next, please. We can see the crowd here. The whole crowd is almost here. Slinger, Lamana, Rudy von Leyden. And Rudy von Leyden was such a spirited art critic that every evening you visit the Jahangir Art Gallery and would do the review out there and would pedal all the way to the old mansion of Times of India in Boni Banda and to see that the review gets published the next day. And he brought a change in art criticism in Bombay. Otherwise, before Rudy von Leyden came into the scene, Times of India would send correspondence to exhibitions and they would write, there is a tower in the garden or something like this. And he changed dramatically, Rudy von Leyden, the style of art writing in India. Slinger moved to Vienna, a very important art patron who supported and bought a lot of progressive art groups painting, very befriended many artists including Oskar Kokoschka and Igor Schiele in Vienna. His collection of over 1,000 books included paintings of these artists. Life was culturally enriching for the young Slinger, but in the shadow of Nazism forced him to flee Australia in 1939. He managed to get onto a P&O ship. He was headed for Shanghai, but when the ocean liner docked in Bombay, he decided on a week to disembark. Fascinated by Buddhism and Hinduism, he wanted to explore the temples of the south. The outbreak of World War II put an end to his travels in high culture. Just he was approaching Mysore. The British government began to arrest foreigners from the Axis power countries. Slinger was sent to an intermittent camp in Ahmedabad. A turning point in his life, Slinger decided to stay back in India, especially in Bombay, where he befriended many progressive artists, those who ultimately formed the progressive artists. Art historically, progressive art group has always remained as a bridge for avant-garde and the emergence of radical contemporary art of the 50s and 60s. The group with Mukraj Anand as his resident spokesman has always been hailed as a progenitor of modern art in India. Despite its vast contribution in the making of language that marks the emergence of an Indian modern in the late 50s and early 60s, it has always been an inspiration for the later artists and those who emerged later. This revisit has been an overview of the repertoire, especially they are devoid of any meta-commentary till date on the basis of public exhibitions and catalogs. We know that dialogue is a continuous process, a landscape where we become familiar with the changes influencing our lives. The signals out an eclectic imagery of a group of artists based in Bombay from the changing order of post-colonial India became instrumental in evolving the visual language of collection and citation. In the inaugural show at NGMA in Bombay titled The Moderns, which was curated by Jashodhara Gandhi in 1996, in the catalogue essay she writes, the very idea of historicizing which carried with it some peculiarly European assumptions on key time and space, secular times, and even sovereignty now challenges the notion of our presence in the waiting rooms of many artists. This CJ school, this CJ hall, in South Bombay, the Kawaji Jahangir Hall in South Bombay, which is today where the NJA Bombay chapter stands, was a site of young pugilists to walk out in the evenings. But the crowds rolled and rolled and knocked on with ferocity that was in the 80s. In the 50s, the CJ hall, donated by the philanthropist Sir Kawaji Jahangir, where the National Gallery of Modern Art stands today, was mainly used for concerts. But it opened with the modern show in 1996. The progressive art group that is associated by Jashokara Dalmia, the group consisted of A.B. Hussain, F.N. Souza, S.K. Bakre, K. Chara, SH Raza, H. Gade, and people like Ram Kumar, Gaitonde, Malchok, and Kishan and Rakbar joined later. They formed the extended circle. So I come to the main point that what made in the making of the progressive art group. Next slide, please. The presence of certain European art at this junction, you see here in Bombay in the late 40s and early 50s, proved to be, and even a little bit after the World War II, proved to be crucial for bringing about an art consciousness. Writes Dalmia in our catalog essay. Waterliner that I've shown the picture just now, an image of it just now, the art director of the Times of India had left Vienna with his wife, Nazi invasion and East India in 1928. Rudy von Linden, whom I have just talked about, art critic of the Times of India, also arrived from Germany. In the early 20s, provided constructive criticism in those times. He was known to the cycle down to the press after the opening of show that he could write on the same day. Considered a heretic, all the 6 artists, along with his associates, almost as thing which has its own story to tell, one face its shadow with wavering angle with various layers of sleeves and gazes. I remember we are very different from each other. Souza had his ideas, he was well read, interested in poetry and music. I remember he took me to Catholic church, where for the first time I heard Johann Sebastian Bach. Hussein I met much later, but the kind work he was doing was being interesting to us. Very quickly he was with us and ultimately meeting day after day, talking, discussing, giving answers. We thought, why can't we come together and make a group? Writes Raza in his autobiography. The ensemble and paintings of the papers have an opulent pleasurability even today that causes us that we have just, witnessed such and absorbed such body of paintings, such gamut of paintings by the 2 speakers. It stands as a testimony that the narratives are inescapable, constantly intersecting our lives and minds, that produce powerful effects on the viewers. We share with them with a view of fluid, impermanent unity, and this time we share with expressions of brushwork and inscriptions in clothes, and others that are much freer and less strong personal identity. But Raza culminated in the Bindu, as we have just heard, and we know we have been observing his repertoire and language. And then curiously, he started also refuting his earlier landscape. And even again, I use that the legend has it, he would try to collect his earlier paintings and he would destroy them. And this concept of the Bindu that Dr. Giti said that when he was 8, he was a very obstinate child, he was a very restless child, fidgeting in the class. So the teacher would draw a black Bindu on the wall and would ask to stare at it. And this reminds me of, that is, connection to the Bindu. It's something like the Buddhist philosophy, like you are dissolving yourself in the shunya, in the darkness, where you dissolve yourself. So it reminds me of that Raza was born between 2 great stupas of Buddhist art, Sachi and Mahu, where if you go to Sachi, even to the Sachi 1 and the Sachi 2 stupa, if you travel along the circumambulatory route, you come back to the shunya, keeping the beads on your right. It's also the same process as Raza followed in his Bindu paintings. Follow the path of Buddhism of dissolving yourself into the Bindu. That is like dissolving into a kind of a shunya. Thank you.
afternoon, and your factor of locating physically between the two very historic traditions of Indian art history is quite an observation, and I really like to thank you for pointing that out to us. The evening has reached to a point where we need to conclude our comments, observations. The floor is open for any questions or comments that you might have. I would first like to take this opportunity to, you know,